You're learning with 9 to 5 English. Business English for the workplace. Hi, Tim here with another 9 to 5 English lesson. In today's lesson, we're going to learn how to talk about your ideas. You might be full of great ideas about your company, your products, or how to connect with your customers. But those ideas aren't very useful if you can't tell other people about them. You probably find yourself in lots of situations where you might talk about your ideas. Think about a staff meeting or a business lunch. Everyone's talking about what the company should do, and you've got a good idea. So do you just shout it out for everyone to hear? No. Rather than just shouting out your idea, it's best to introduce it first. I mean, you should tell everyone that you have an idea you want to share. And you might say exactly that. Like, I've got something to share. Or you could say, here's what I've been thinking. Or, how about this? These are just some of the ways that you can introduce your idea. How about practicing some of these expressions? We're going to present some examples. After you hear each example, try repeating it yourself. Ready? Let's give it a go.
How about this for an idea?
Here's what I've been thinking about.
I've got something I'd like to share on this point.
One way of looking at this would be to
So, we've just practiced some different ways of introducing an idea. Once you've done that, then people are prepared. They are now listening to hear what you have to say. But you need to be a bit careful how you state your idea. If you're not the boss, you'll need to avoid saying, "We have to," or "It is necessary for us to do something." In many situations, that's too strong. If you're just making a suggestion, then you need something softer. One way of suggesting an idea is saying, "We could." That's a polite way to present your idea as one possibility. So, in a marketing meeting, you might say, "We could create some new TV ads." There are other ways of making suggestions using "how about" and "what if." For example, you could say, "How about creating some ads?" Or, "What if we created some ads?" Another really simple way to present your idea is with the words "I think." For example, you might say, "I think we should lower our costs." That's just a bit softer than saying, "We should lower our costs," which is too direct. Many people don't like to hear ideas suggested that directly. Now it's your turn to try using these expressions. You'll hear some examples. After each example, repeat what you hear. Let's begin.
We could hold a big promotional event.
I think there are a few ways we could cut costs.
What if we bought the building instead of renting it?
Why don't we make a mobile version of the website?
As you heard, to suggest an idea, sometimes we ask a question. That shows that we are open to what other people think. After all, you're not giving orders. Rather, you're trying to get people to think your idea is a good one. So, it's important simply to ask them what they think about it. You might ask an entire group of people by saying, "How does everyone feel about that?" Or, "Anyone have any thoughts on this?" You might also ask one person to respond with something like, "What's your view on this, Betty?" One more simple way to ask what people think about an idea is with the question, "How does that sound?" And do you notice in this and the other expressions I've given you that we say this or that to refer to the idea? Using these words is better than saying my idea or asking, "Do you agree with me?" Why is saying this better than saying my idea? Well, because you want people to focus on the idea, not on whose idea it is. If you say me and my a lot, people might feel you are thinking about yourself too much. Let's practice using these expressions for asking what people think about your ideas. Remember to repeat each example after you hear it.
How does everyone feel about that?
What's your view on this, Dave?
How does that sound?
Anyone have any thoughts on this?
Okay, you've done some great practice with some useful expressions, but how does this sound in a conversation? Well, let's listen to a short discussion between Sandra and Kelly about a new office design.
Looking at the office layout, does anyone have any ideas?
Yes, I've got something I'd like to share on this.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, what if we put another meeting room on the second floor?
Can you see how that worked? Sandra says she's got something to share about the office layout. Then, once everyone's listening, she makes a suggestion using a what-if question. Now, it's your turn to practice. We'll repeat the dialogue, but this time, we're going to beep out Sandra's words. You will have to say those parts yourself. Remember, first you'll say that you have something to share, and then you'll suggest putting another meeting room on the second floor.
Looking at the office layout, does anyone have any ideas? Sure, go ahead.
All right, so we've learned some great ways to talk about your ideas and to ask what other people think about your ideas. In our next lesson, we'll learn about how to agree with other people's ideas. Until then, so long and happy learning. You're learning with 9 to 5 English. Business English for the workplace. Hi, Tim here with another 9 to 5 English lesson. In today's lesson, we're going to learn how to agree with ideas. Every day, in life and work, we have to decide whether we agree or disagree with other people's ideas. It might be in a serious discussion about who to hire or how to cut costs, or in a simple conversation about where to go for lunch. And when you hear an idea that you like, you want to show your support for it, right? So, you say something to agree with the idea, to give it your support. And one good way to do that is to use that word, support. I mean, you can say something like, I can support that. There are other ways to say the same thing. For example, you can say something makes a lot of sense, which means it is a good idea. Or you could say that an idea could work. And by saying something makes sense or could work, you're not just saying you agree, but that you agree because it's a good idea. How about practicing these expressions for agreeing? We're going to present some examples. After each example, try repeating it yourself. Ready? Let's get started.
Yes, I think that could work.
I can support that.
You've brought up a really important point there.
That makes a lot of sense to me, too.
So, we've just practiced some simple ways of showing that you agree with an idea. But what if you think an idea is more than just good? I mean, what if you think it's a fantastic idea? Well, in that case, you want to agree strongly with the idea and show that you really love it. In English, we've got some great expressions for this situation. For example, you can say, I couldn't have said it better myself, which means the person explained it perfectly. Similarly, you can say, I couldn't agree with you more, which means you totally agree. These expressions beginning with I are used to show you strongly agree, but you can start with that, meaning the idea, and say how great it is. For example, you could say, that's brilliant. Or, that's the best idea I've heard all day. Let's practice these expressions for agreeing strongly with ideas. Remember to repeat each example after you hear it.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
I couldn't agree with you more.
That's brilliant!
That's the best idea I've heard all day.
Now, we've been focusing on how to show you agree with an idea. But sometimes you hear an idea and you're not sure if you agree. I mean, you don't really think it's a good or a bad idea. In this situation, you can say that you feel neutral about it. So, how can you express that feeling? Well, for one, you can say that you are not exactly sure about it. That tells people that you might agree or you might disagree, but you don't know yet. Another way to express that you are neutral about an idea is to say you could go either way, or that there are pros and cons to both options. These are useful expressions when you're not sure what you think, or when you don't want to support one side or the other too quickly. And if you really think that two sides of an idea or two choices are perfectly equal, you can say, it's a toss-up. This expression comes from tossing a coin, which is a way of choosing between two sides. Now it's your turn to practice using these expressions. Once again, you can repeat the example after you hear them.
Well, I'm not exactly sure about that yet.
I could go either way on this.
I think there are pros and cons to both options.
To me, it's a toss-up.
So, we've worked through some great expressions for agreeing and showing that you feel neutral about an idea. But how does this sound in conversation? Let's listen to a short dialogue between two coworkers, John and Lucas. John is discussing some ideas for the business, and Lucas agrees with him.
So, I think we need to focus on new customers.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me too.
And maybe we need a fresh ad campaign.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Can you hear how Lucas showed his agreement with John's ideas? He said that the idea of focusing on new customers makes a lot of sense. That expression shows basic agreement. Then he agreed strongly with the idea of a fresh ad campaign, saying he couldn't agree more. Now it's your turn to practice. We'll repeat the dialogue, but this time we're going to beep out the second speaker's words. You will have to say those parts yourself. Remember to start by saying that the first idea makes a lot of sense. Then you'll say that you couldn't agree more. Here we go.
So, I think we need to focus on new customers. And maybe we need a fresh ad campaign.
All right. So we've learned some great ways to agree with other people's ideas. And we've looked at how to show you are neutral about an idea. In our next lesson, we'll look at how to disagree with an idea. Until then, so long and happy learning. You're learning with 9 to 5 English. Business English for the workplace. Hi, Tim here with another 9 to 5 English lesson. In today's lesson, we're going to learn how to disagree with ideas. People disagree with each other's ideas all the time. In fact, disagreement isn't just natural, it's necessary. How else can we sort out the good ideas from the bad ones? But disagreeing with people isn't always easy. If you're not careful, you can make people feel hurt or angry. So, how can you do that? How can you tell someone you don't like their idea without upsetting them? Well, one thing you can do is avoid stating your disagreement too strongly. For example, you can say, "I'm not sure that's a good idea." What you're really saying is that it is not a good idea, but it's softer if you sound a bit unsure. The word might can work this way as well, as in, that might not be the best way to go. And notice that both these ways of disagreeing focus on the idea, not the person presenting the idea. Focusing on the idea can help reduce the risk of upsetting the person you're disagreeing with. Another way to carefully disagree with an idea is to use a special expression that softens your words. A couple of good ones are, "to be honest," and "I'm afraid." Starting a sentence with these expressions can help your disagreement sound more polite. How about practicing these different ways to disagree? You're going to hear some examples. After each example, try repeating it yourself. Ready? Let's give it a go.
I'm not sure that's the best option here.
I'm afraid I don't totally agree with you.
To be honest, I think that would be difficult.
Well, that might not be the best way to go.
So, we've just practiced some simple ways of disagreeing carefully. But there's another really effective way to disagree, and that's what I call the yes, but approach. With the yes, but approach, you actually start by agreeing or saying something good about the idea. Then you use the word but to introduce your disagreement or the reason why you disagree. For example, you might say, "Good idea, but we don't have enough time." Or you could say, "Yes, this option is cheaper, but it doesn't look very nice." Why is this yes, but approach effective? Well, it shows that you have an open mind. I mean, if you can say something good about the person's idea, then you've clearly thought carefully about it. You're not just disagreeing to be difficult or to start an argument. Now it's your turn to practice using the yes, but approach. Remember to repeat each example after you hear it.
Good idea, but nobody has the time to make it happen.
I see what you're saying, but I'm not sure I can agree.
Although it costs less, I really don't think it's as good.
Okay, so we've practiced some different ways of disagreeing carefully. But sometimes you don't want to be careful. Sometimes you want to make it very clear that you disagree, and you're not worried about making someone feel bad. In this situation, you can say what you think very directly and clearly. For example, you might say, "That's out of the question," or "There's no way we could do that." Both of these expressions mean that something is impossible. Another way to disagree strongly is to ask a question like, "Do you really think that would work?" What you really mean is, "That won't work." But by asking a question like this, it makes it sound as if you're surprised that someone might actually believe it's a good idea. One more way of disagreeing strongly is to tell someone they must be kidding or joking. Of course, the person isn't really joking, but saying this makes it sound like their idea is terrible. Now, let's practice these expressions for disagreeing strongly. Once again, repeat the examples after you hear them.
Do you really think that would work?
That's out of the question.
There's no way we could do that.
You've got to be kidding.
So, we've learned some different ways of disagreeing with ideas. But how do these expressions sound in a conversation? Let's listen to a short dialogue between two coworkers. They're talking about whether or not they should hire a person named Jill.
Okay, it's clear to me that we should hire Jill.
I'm afraid I don't totally agree with that.
Well, she's got a lot of experience.
I know experience is important, but she's not a good fit.
As you heard, the man disagrees carefully with the idea of hiring Jill. Then, when the woman mentions Jill's experience, the man starts by acknowledging that experience is important before he disagrees by using the word but. Now it's your turn to practice. We'll repeat the dialogue, but this time we're going to beep out the second speaker's words. You will have to say those parts yourself. Remember to start by disagreeing carefully. Then you can use a yes, but approach to comment on Jill's experience.
Okay, it's clear to me that we should hire Jill. Well, she's got a lot of experience.
All right. We've learned some great ways to disagree with people's ideas carefully. And we've also practiced disagreeing strongly with ideas. Be sure to tune in next time when we'll start learning how to talk about your personal background. Until then, so long and happy learning.